Good afternoon. Welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we're devoted to conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. It's Wednesday, July 17th, and I'm Jeff Johnson, Managing Director at Actum and moderator for today's conversation, which is the second forum in the City Club's free outdoor summer series underneath the chandelier at Playhouse Square. They'll be here every Wednesday at noon through August 14th. So most of us know, whether because we've been stuck in traffic or we've seen the news, that Superman has realized the metropolis that created it and been filming in Cleveland. But we know that there are a legacy of films from the Avengers, Judas and the Black Messiah, Draft Day. For decades, states and cities across the United States have jockeyed to attract the major motion picture industry in hopes of spurring jobs and economic growth. The industry isn't just Hollywood blockbusters. Independent films, television series, and other media productions make an important contribution to economic activity in Northeast Ohio. However, one major challenge is that this economic activity isn't lifting all boats, at least not enough of the time. In many sectors of the economy, there's still a need to connect minority communities to the opportunity of work in media production. Sheila Wright is the founder and president of the Crew Foundation. Crew works to make sure, Crew works to make sure Ohio builds a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive industry to catalyze economic growth. We'll learn more about her organization and the goals here in just a minute. Also joining us is Amir Miller, CEO and founder of Pure Vitality Productions. Please give him as a big of applause as you did, Sister Sheila. And he was one of the first to participate in Crew. Now, if you all have questions for our speakers, you're going to be able to text them to 330-541-5794. That's 330-541-5794. And City Club staff will try to work it into the second half of our conversation. Members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, please join me again in welcoming Sheila Wright and Amir Miller. So, Sheila and Amir, there are 20,000 directions we could go in starting this conversation. But first, I'd like, Sheila, for you to talk about Crew, why you thought it was necessary to begin this movement, and what you hope both the short-term and long-term impact of Crew will be.
Thank you for that question, Jeff. So the Crew Foundation, which stands for Creating Real Entertainment Workforce, we created that after we had done a lot of feasibility work around what the ecosystem here existed in terms of production. And what we noticed is that a lot of resources were flowing in the region, but not really flowing to the production's work with respect to minority organizations or just independent films, which we came to learn takes care of people year round when we don't have features. And so we started looking at, we knew we had to disrupt some things, and we felt like we would be able to have people answer our calls, bring this conversation into rooms that were not talking about this, and then fund and support organizations that were doing this work. Because we understood that in order for us to have an industry, we need to attract projects here and stand up what's already here. And that's what we sought to do.
So I want you to talk about that a little bit, because I don't think, I've done television for the last 17 years in one form or another. And I think at every project, I've learned more about what I didn't know. And so when we think about feature films or think about television series, many of us don't have a full understanding of the depth of the number of people that are involved to make that production happen. I know I didn't until I started actually having to do the budget for a per episode series and recognizing what all was necessary. So I think the question is, how do we best educate both the private sector, who is going to be involved in driving some of this, but also the community in understanding an industry that most people only know from one vantage point?
Yeah, so I think conversations like this is a great way to start. I think it's who's having the conversation. We need stakeholders to recognize this industry as something other than what you experience. It's not healthcare, but it's a lot of jobs. I don't know if you've ever watched the end of a Marvel movie or any movie. You can feed a small country on the number of people that have worked on those films. And so I think it's one, being able to speak in a way that they understand. So for example, I use the gas station analogy when we talk about the larger industry, and then I'll get to the local economy. If you go to a gas station and the only thing they sell is gas, that's the only thing you're going to get. You're going to get the gas and leave. But if you go to a gas station, speaking of gas, that was almost timed. If you go to a gas station and they sell soda, gum, all the other things that you need, maybe have a restaurant, you'll stay longer and you'll spend more money. Well, our incentive at the state is gas. That gets them to come here. We have to find and invest in more ways for the industry to stay here and spend more money here. So I think speaking to it in terms of business, a bottom line approach, if we start framing it as project-based manufacturing, that should be easy for Ohioans. We are a union town, we are a trade town, and that's what we're promoting here. We're not talking about the red carpet. No, and that's important. I get it. But we are talking about the jobs and the support and the infrastructure to support this industry. So I think it's speaking in terms that business leaders and stakeholders respond to and understand, and getting them to take it seriously.
Well, and I want to come back to some of that because I think some that are listening know what you're saying and some have no idea what you're saying. And so I want to come, no. And that's why we're having a conversation. I want to come down and begin to break some of those pieces down. But I want to bring Amir into the conversation first. Amir, your Pure Vitality production company is only 2 years old, but you've been in the business longer than that. I'm curious about what excited you about getting into the business, and why did you commit to stay in Cleveland to do it versus going somewhere else?
Well, I had a boss told me that it's better to be a big fish in a small pond than to be, a small fish in a big pond. And Cleveland has a lot of opportunity, a lot of opportunity to grow, to become bigger. And that's why I kind of want to stay in Cleveland, because there's so much stuff in Cleveland that we have not tapped into yet.
And so you just got done working on the Superman film. What are some of the other things that you've worked on? And can you break down for folks some of the roles that you've played in the production side of some of the work that you have done?
So I started off in 2021. I started off this movie called White Noise. I was a locations assistant. From that movie, I met a lot of people and went to Cincinnati to do a movie called Shirley with Regina King. From that movie, I did Shooting Stars. It's a LeBron James biopic about his team growing up, the Fab Five. And after that, just a couple small other movies. Superman is the latest one that I just got off of.
But I wanted to be clear. You're not an actor.
No.
You're not trying to act at this point.
No, not trying to act. I'm not an actor.
And I think it's easy to understand what a site producer is, but when you talk about being a production assistant, and it may vary from project to project, what are some of the things that a production assistant does?
Production assistant or a location assistant can do, there's many jobs on the film. A production assistant helps run the production, helps make sure everything's okay, make sure that everything's on time. We can do a lot of side things that help with the assistant directors, but pretty much there's so many jobs available in the film industry that no one's probably ever heard of, but they're very crucial to make sure that the film is, being run properly.
And so I appreciate both of you introducing where you fit and want to fit within this ecosystem. And I want us to dig into this notion of equity and opportunity and access. But I also want folks to understand the industry itself, what it takes to bring a production to the city, and what it takes for the city to be prepared for production. And so how many of you in the audience know about the Ohio Film Tax Credit? All right, so almost everybody. Sheila, I would love for you to break down what makes the Ohio Film Tax Credit different or unique than other states' tax credit, and not so much the amount, but just what the difference is, and what the benefit is to a filmmaker or a studio to come and do their production as a result of that tax credit.
So, Ohio's film tax credit, at least it has been every 2 years, which is different than some of the other tax credits around the country. I think you have to have 70% of your financing together before you can do that, and it's a 30% credit that you can get back. So, and you have to be at least $300,000. At least that's the way it has been for you to be able to use that credit. So if it's a larger film and they can come in and they meet that criteria, it attracts them here. Again, it's the gas at the gas station. They're going to come here. It helps to their budget. And, I know you asked me about Ohio, but just to give you a sense of the importance of a tax credit to attract projects, the Marvel franchise sat on shelves for decades. They couldn't afford to make it. Georgia uncapping that tax, and it's not just uncapped. They can apply it narrowly. They can resell that tax. Georgia's financing allowed us to have that franchise. So it is about the money. And I know you're a very strict moderator. Can I say hello to a couple of people, Jeff? Is that okay?
Well, you already started.
Okay, I'm sorry. You're going to whoop me. I just want to recognize my mother in the audience, Colleen Wright. I want to recognize some of my babies from the Crew Foundation. Wave your hands. I want to recognize Vice Chair, Councilwoman Cheryl Stevens, and Council President Pernell Jones. They made incredible investments and to support the Crew Foundation. So I just wanted to do that so I didn't get in trouble. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Amir, can you build on that a little bit?
Right.
And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about why you think Cleveland in particular
Right.
is a value proposition, but also to Sheila's point, what are the limitations on what we're not going to see in Cleveland as a result of where the tax credit is and is not?
Oh yeah, so Cleveland, it's a very unique city because of our infrastructure and what we have in Cleveland. You can have shots of the water, and pretend it's the ocean, movie magic. You can have shots of rural land and film out in the farmlands. You can have a city that looks like New York City and tweak it a little bit, in post or visual effects and stuff like that. So pretty much Cleveland has a lot of different looks to it, which gives the director a lot of different options, which is good for a film. And with the tax credit, it's cheaper to film in Cleveland than New York. If you go to New York, producers do not want to spend money to film in New York. They don't want to spend money to film in Los Angeles. Everything is about money in this industry. Everything's about saving money, budgeting, and Cleveland is a perfect place to do that with the tax incentive that we have. Films can come here, spend a lot of money. They can get a lot of money back depending on how much money that you spend, which is why Cleveland is such a good area in that. The limitations that Cleveland has.
Well, less Cleveland as a city,
right.
and more Ohio.
Mhm.
Right.
What our tax credit limits are. So for instance, I think both of you talked about Marvel and have worked on Marvel, but we know that principal shooting is not going to be here. We know the spot shooting is going to be here, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I was going to say we need to add more things to the gas station. There's no infrastructure here to support it. There's some work they refurbish some spaces, but for example, we're very excited to have Superman here. But they rented, I think they started with 17, now I think it's at 11 stages in Georgia.
Right.
And so that economy is important. In 2020, a median-sized stage in Georgia, because I pulled the rates, was going for about $4,500 a day, and that particular studio was billing everything to the client, $4,500 a day for one stage. So that was in 2020. I can't imagine what it is now, and that's important, but I'm saying the incentive attracts them here. There's things that we need to put in it, and I think they're working on it. I noticed Senator Shurring just proposed an amendment to the incentive to take it to $100 million. I think the last time there was some infrastructure dollars in it. I think he moved to change that. But, and be clear, when we talk about a Georgia, and I know we're not Georgia, a Louisiana, Pennsylvania, they are starting to double down on the industry. And that's what has to happen here. It can't continue to move based on who might be in office. It has to be a real commitment. And the work is being done. I see Bill Garvey back there in the Film Commission. They are working to make sure that that incentive continues to grow. It is moved. It was stale for many years. They moved it to 50 million, and there's a 75 million opportunity. And then Kirk Shurring with his proposed amendment. And let me let you know, I'm getting calls from LA, Georgia, New York, New Mexico, Louisiana. They're paying attention to what's happening. They're watching it. So, we need the local stakeholders. And I'll be quiet. I had a very high-ranking official say to me, Sheila, and this is a state official, he says, Sheila, I agree with you and I get it, but no one's talking about this but you and the film commissions. And I said, what he is saying is no one he listens to is talking about this. We need the Greater Cleveland Partnership to be behind this industry. We need our governments to be behind this industry. We need the local players to show that we're going to stand this up. We didn't need a theater commission. We didn't need an incentive to stand up Playhouse Square, and that's one of the largest economic drivers in Northeast Ohio.
So let's create some context, because again, you say $100 million, and $100 million may seem like a lot to some folks. I too have had conversations with folks, especially that are doing television series, and they're saying, I need a $50 million tax credit for one show. So $100 million isn't necessarily going to create a full industry, but it does create frame for what's possible.
That's right.
I'm glad that you mentioned the Film Commission, because I also want folks to understand what is the ecosystem in Cleveland. And so we've got the Film Commission that in many cases has been driving, I think, a level of connectivity, a level of information and collaboration.
Yep.
But what are the other parts of the ecosystem, and what do we not have? What are we missing that's going to be a part of that? Amir, please.
I think when you shoot a movie, sometimes you use stages, and a stage is what you do when you're doing something inside. It's a set that's can be controlled really easily with lighting. It's not outside. It's just a big area where you can shoot all day if you want to. It can be nighttime, it can be daytime, but it's called a sound stage, or a stage if you must. Cleveland is known for having good locations. So that means like being on a location, like let's say if this was a set, this is a outdoor set, it's a location. Cleveland is missing stages to where a lot of the shooting has been done. I know Superman was just shot here. I was working on the movie. We shot 16 days in Cleveland, I believe. I think it was 4 weeks total. They shot 66 days in Atlanta on a stage. So that just goes to show you how much they actually shoot indoors now in terms of like movies like Superman, where a lot of it is visual effects. They use a stage to shoot a lot of movies, and we don't have that in Cleveland.
So, and with respect to the ecosystem, I mean, I see some folks in the audience. So we have Caramoo, which you don't recognize maybe for film, but during the pandemic, they had to make sure that they started streaming and do it. There's a whole new product line with production. Shout out to Tony and Asila sitting in the back. We have Lillian Piles, who is a casting agent, director, owns her own company. We have Art of Me. Stephanie couldn't be here. We have G Cup. Is Donna Dabbs here? Shout out to Donna Dabbs in the back. She does the film festival, who I will say will partner with the Crew Foundation to train our students who will have projects how to enter a festival and do the scoring. In my little crazy mind, Crew Foundation partners with G Cup, and we send Donna around the world to bring back industry standards so we can make sure and bring distributors here. What we need here is the infrastructure. In order for you to have a thriving industry, you need three things for a recipe. You need the incentive, you need the infrastructure, and you need talent. You need a workforce. Once you have those three things, it's like a 4-phase activity. You start attracting tourists. Then you start attracting transplants. Then you start seeing more infrastructure go up. And then you start seeing IP companies that come and support the work of the industry. There's a reason why Georgia is now one of the newer, larger tech hubs in the country, because tech follows that industry. So we just need those three things for a recipe. I always say the industry is like the popular girl in high school. I was not the popular girl in high school, but you know, she's only gonna go where it's convenient. She's only gonna go where you make room for her. And she's not gonna be, hindered by your shortcomings. So the things that we need to bring that here are those three recipes. But the ecosystem here, these people have been toiling for years. Lillian Piles continues to work on independent films. When features are intermittent and are not here, they continue to work. We need our stakeholders, our government, our foundations, to plow them with resources. We might have the next Jeff Johnson here. We might have the next Tyler Perry here. I'm not pipe dreaming, I'm serious. But if they have to spend all their time trying to nickel and dime and pay their bills, we'll never get them to where they need to be. And so I think we need to break the gridlock of resources and allocate them to the ecosystem. The Crew Foundation, I'm proud to say, we have reallocated our resources. 85% of our budget goes to them. That's where our budget goes. We have a lean, mean budget. And and it's a lifetime commitment for them. When they get into a union, we're going to cover that cost. If they do a feature, we're going to do 30% of that cost. We are making commitments to them, because when it was put upon my heart to help build this industry, it took me a long time to realize that it's them.
So, and to that point, I mean, I think that you've laid out a number of factors, but I think that there's debate about chicken or the egg, and what needs to happen first to actually drive growth. And many of the people whose names you mentioned are navigating that, and fighting for that, and dealing with Columbus, but also dealing with the private sector and attempting to attract more business. And all of that is happening here. But what do you think is going to be the thing that creates the tipping point of a evolution to another level of investment and opportunity? Because I'll be honest, again, I know more about the business outside of Cleveland than I know about the business in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. But what I also recognize is I know when an ecosystem looks like it's serious about an industry, and when it's lukewarm about an industry, because you put your money behind it and you double down on it. Yep. And so there still seems to be a question with many folks in the city about, are we really going to be serious about the film industry? And film is not just movies, right?
That's right.
So when you start talking about the economics and building stages and having those stages filled, TV is a hell of a lot more consistent than are movies. And if you're able to create certain relationships, you have long-term rental relationships or folks that are securing those stages for projects. So I'm just curious, because I don't think there's a silver bullet, and I don't want us to pretend like there is one.
Right.
But is there in your mind a chicken or an egg or something in between that has to happen here in order for there to be an evolution of the industry here? And by that, I mean in the state of Ohio, not just in the city of Cleveland.
Right. Well, I will just say I'm seeing some signs of it now. So I just read that there's a new studio coming to Columbus. They're building a stage down there. That's important. We have Severance. I know they're in negotiation with that building, but the industry has been up at Severance for years now, doing segmented projects, but it's quiet. That industry is like, it's, barricade in, you don't know that it's happening. But I think if we may not have it's a tertiary market here. So it's tricky to invest in real estate in a tertiary market when the incentive is every 2 years. And so maybe new construction soundstage may not be the answer now, but we have a lot of space and buildings here. If we begin to maybe invest in something that's here locally, because Cleveland, and I'll use Cleveland, I know it's not just Cleveland, but business leaders, they may not understand the film industry, but they understand real estate. And I think a real estate project, or not because I'm a developer, I think a real estate project with respect to a sound stage, refurbishing what's here, when you start allocating dollars for that, it's less of a risk. We can use it for different things, and it starts people talking. I also think it is recognizing the ecosystem here formally, whether that's probably through funding. I think it is bringing them together and saying, what is it that you need that will make you more viable? I think it is also getting business leaders at the table to talk about this strategy. These conversations are happening only with the people who are in the industry. That's why we started the Crew Foundation. I'm not a filmmaker. I don't have that background, but I figured that we could get some business leaders together, and that's essentially what we did. So I think it's leveraging the infrastructure that we have. They did it at Severance. I think we do more investment. I think we celebrate, highlight, and connect with investments that come here, like the studio that's being built in Columbus now that I just read about. I think it is our stakeholders. We have elected officials here who have supported the industry. When you bring it to them, you have a conversation, they have said yes. They have supported it, but we have not positioned it for them to champion it. And I think that's another thing that we have to do. And I think I saw, I'm gonna call him out, Marty. Was Marty here with the partnership? Is he gone? We need our largest economic development player to say, this is an industry that we care about. We got the innovation dollars, we got healthcare, we got the water piece. Recognize this as a real industry. And it's up to us that are in the ecosystem to show up so they can see that there's something to invest in. So, I mean, there is no silver bullet. There's a lot of ways to approach it. We just have to elevate and say, yes, I appreciate our friends at the Film Commission being back here. But for many, many years, people just associated that's the industry, which is unfair to them because they can't carry the whole weight of this. We got to recognize the players that are in there and openly do that.
And the opportunity, right?
And the opportunity.
So I mean, I don't want us to get off of this, and then I want to open the floor for discussion, because in giving context to where the film industry is and isn't, it helps us have a better conversation about where are Black people, yes. And where are their equity opportunities and where are there barriers. And so in an industry that is still attempting to grow, does that often make it more challenging for people of color and others who are not currently part of the ecosystem to find spaces to get access to opportunity and even access to training to get to the place where they can effectively move with a level of skill within the industry?
So do you want to
Amir,
respond to that,
please.
Amir?
Yeah. Sorry, can you hear me? Well, I'd say it's difficult breaking into the industry when you're first starting off. I personally had no idea that I could ever work in movies growing up. I always loved movies, but I didn't think it was feasible. I didn't think it was possible until I actually met someone who was in the movie industry, and they brought me into the industry. It's not something that you kind of just apply for and you get. It's always who you know. And that's difficult, because if you're starting off like me and you don't know anybody and the only person that you knew was your neighbor, you just got lucky. And a lot of people aren't lucky as I was, and especially people who look like me. And I think that's like, the conversation that needs to be had is, how do we get more people who look like me or any type of person into the industry without having to know somebody? There's no programs except, what Sheila's trying to do right now with Crew. She helped me a lot. She's helping people right now. But there wasn't a program like that that's accessible and teaches you how to work in the industry, teaches you what the industry does, the different jobs that they have, where you'll fit in at. So I think that is the kind of like the difficult thing is breaking in. What other option is there besides knowing somebody,
So I would just say, and shout out to LJ, our camera person. That's our facilitator for our program. So in terms of Black people in this industry, so that's a large conversation, obviously. And we know it's a reflection of a larger systemic issue, right? That's part of how we navigate through this world in marginalized spaces. That's one piece. But if you start talking about investment, that's a different conversation, because we can start to be targeted and conscious about our investments. Anybody, I hope other people can hear me, anyone who has the power and the decision-making ability to give dollars, when you are confronted with, not confronted, when someone approaches you for that support, you need to ask, where is the diversity in this effort? And I don't just mean on pictures. I mean, what can we point to? But the other thing I would say is this: it's hard to measure, because when productions come here, we can't tell them who to hire. We don't have a workforce here. So they're bringing their talent with them. But those that are here who are working all the time, we can stand them up. We can stand them up and invest what's here. So I think it's twofold in terms of Cleveland. In terms of Ohio, we got to get to that. We got to get that incentive higher and get some infrastructure. But locally here at home, if we stand up the ecosystem that works year round, you're going to see more Black people working in the industry. They may not get a chance to work on full features, but they can work on independent films, and they can walk on to full features with that experience. So where a feature isn't here, someone should be able to go work with G Cuff, Artemy, Handmade Films, Lillian Piles. They should be able to go and work with them and get paid. It's workforce. I know it's art, but it's where art meets the economy. It's where they come together. And so,
well, when I think it's important, because that's a great point, right? I think it's important to talk about art is a product, but the business itself is not. And whether you're talking about craft services, or whether you're talking about the vast number of people that are hired, whether you're talking about drivers that are helping to move things around the city, whether you're talking about there is so much that goes into both large and small productions. And so I think you talked about even earlier, it's not just what you see on the screen.
Nope.
That is a product that is delivered and is paid for, but the creation of that project is real jobs, and a lot of those jobs are union jobs.
That's right.
Depending on where you are. And so the ecosystem is complex, and so there is a ton of opportunity. I want to begin audience Q&A for our live stream audience at cityclub.org, or those just joining. I'm Jeff Johnson, Managing Director for Actum and moderator for today's discussion. We're here with Amir Miller and with Sheila Wright. And we welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, as well as our live stream audience. If you'd like to text a question for our speakers, please text it to 330-541-5794. It's 330-541-5794. And City Club staff will try to work it into the program. Can we have our first question, please?
Good afternoon.
How are you?
This is Lou. You just mentioned we probably have not found a silver bullet yet, but we know we do have some kryptons here already. Fortunately, our government already started whatever they can, even with one-time funding. For example, County Council has been using the ARPA funds, started funding some of the local theater groups, either to rehab their facilities or start training young people to learn about the industry, the different jobs. Not necessarily as an acting job, but it will be the ones, one of our gentlemen here just mentioned, production positions. Even we can go with the post-production positions. So I would like to know if there's any way we can promote the city and the county in Cuyahoga counties to start seeking permanent fundings to fund the educations and the technologies to help our young people and even the old people to get into this particular industry. Because it's not really a full-time job. You have to commit 40 hours a day. Some of the people may not have the health to do that kind of work. But in the film or any TV productions, you need different people as, you know, the people at the background, for example.
So I want to make sure we get to answer your question.
Yeah, so I would like to know if any way we can promote that idea to start rebuilding what we are missing, which are the kryptons we need to get rid of.
Thank you so much.
So I will just say, and shout out to my soror Meredith Turner who came. Meredith was actually, I think, the first elected official to get behind the Crew Foundation. It's not about just Crew, but she did do that. And most recently, Vice Chair and President Pernell Jones have come to support the Crew Foundation. I sat on the board of the Film Commission for years. The city and the county has invested about $500,000 for years into that organization and their work. I know that I think Artemy has gotten city dollars before. So when you bring it to them and it makes business sense, they will do that investment. I don't think we're talking about it a lot because here in Northeast Ohio, and just period, sometimes it becomes a resource thing, right? Who's getting what resources? So people aren't yelling from the mountaintop what's happening. But I do think we need to start talking about it because locally, it seems that our local officials have been supportive. Blaine Griffin, council president, said, listen, Sheila, we're going to pass the hat now. You came late, but just come and talk to us. So there is support for this with our local officials, I believe.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you for this very important program. You know, there's a movement it's been going on to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Under Project 2025, there would be no such thing anymore as DEI. So in the work that you're doing, in the important work that you're doing, are you finding any resistance when it comes to trying to focus on DEI and making sure that you have a diverse area to be able to have the success that you're having?
You know, I would just say this, Merle. We started the Crew Foundation understanding the need to diversify what was happening. But through our work and exploration, we discovered it's not just minorities who are hurting from the lack of a thriving industry, it's Clevelanders and Ohioans. And so it's a little game of blocking and tackling, if you will. We are going to continue to support and train the people that are here. And I would say, specific, since you asked about our work in Northeast Ohio, I don't think we're going to get any pushback to do that work. But we also got to do the other piece to build it up, because we can't even measure DEI, if you will, in our efforts, because we're not even a tertiary market as it relates to the industry. But I'm just going to take it one step further and I'll be quiet. I understood when I got into this space. I was on the board of Karamu House. I was on the board of the Film Commission, and people began to reach out to me because they know my story, they know my brand, they know I'm gonna be honest, and they know I'm gonna say something. And people who look like me started to reach out to me and say, we're starving, we're not getting resources. And we took a liberty creating Crew with my board members and myself. None of us are filmmakers, but we're business leaders. And we understand people will take our call. And so I don't anticipate us getting much pushback, but we're leveraging that.
I think it's important too, as we continue to have that conversation, that we recognize that culture is valuable, and not just from a storytelling perspective, from a know-how perspective, from a cultural currency perspective. And if we begin to leverage it that way, especially in this industry, we see it work. And so we see that happen in other states that are leveraging not only tax credit, but recognize that there is an endless appetite for content. And the vast majority of consumers are of color. So when you start talking about where are the opportunities to create diasporic relationships, where we're talking about how many Caribbeans and Africans are in the city of Cleveland, and how are we making diasporic stories that appeal to a diasporic marketplace, that has us in a place where we start thinking about how are we creating content that is more digestible to a global market than a domestic market. Anybody who cares about money, which is what Amir talked about, understands that that makes me more money. That gives me access to more consumers. That puts me in more markets. Right now, there's a brother. How many of you all know the Griot? Have heard of the Griot? The Griot was a black news site. It was sold to MSNBC. It was then sold again after they got access back to Byron Allen. And the brother who created the Griot now lives in Brazil and has a company on Afro-Latino insights, because he recognizes that Brazil and Colombia are the first and third country with the largest black population outside of Africa. So there are folks that understand that we just got to stop positioning ourselves as tributaries of charity and understand that we drive the market, that there is a global diasporic market that spends a hell of a lot of money. And if we target the industry that way, then we ain't got to talk to nobody about DEI. We just got to say, give me the money. And if you're not bringing people that understand those cultures, whether it's black folks or whether it's those that are trying to have further expansions in Southeast Asia, or whether it's those in Europe, we're not talking about just one color. We're talking about culture. Leveraging culture for growth should be the strategy, not please help me out being the strategy. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Renee Richard from Cuyahoga Community College. And we in Cuyahoga County, we train the workforce. That is what we do. We do it across 4 campuses. We have studios across 4 campuses. So we have opportunities. We have a film department, and we have non-credit film trainers. So we have lots of opportunities to collaborate with all of the partners that you mentioned to begin to train folks for behind the camera jobs. But again, I think part of it might be this chicken and egg that you talked about. But I say, let's just break it and let's collaborate. Let's make this happen. And whatever the question is, whatever you think we have to do to train that workforce, let us know. Let's figure it out.
Renee, can you build on that for a second? And I ask you, based on the resources that you have and the space that you have available, what would you say you need to best leverage that?
I think what we need to know is, what are the jobs? We understand that there are pre-production and post-production and even during production. We know that in my small world at corporate college, we are training entrepreneurs on lighting, audio, the machinery, the technology, creating runs of show. But we need to know, what do you need broader than that? Because we at Cuyahoga Community College are always looking forward. What's the next trend? Where's the workforce going? And if we need to create a workforce to get that $4,500 a day stage rental or everything that comes with it, then we will help you create that workforce. And I know one of my colleagues, Olivia, is here or was here. There she is. Yeah. I mean, they have a full film production crew. And like I said, we have studios on every campus. So we just need to know, should we focus on one area? Should we focus on lighting? Should we focus on, I'm not a person either, but I am an economics person. So you tell me where the demand for the jobs will be, and we will create those programs for you.
So don't leave yet, Renee, because I want to do some stuff here real quick. So between Sheila and between the Film Commission, it sounds like there needs to be a conversation about what are the priority opportunities. Because the beautiful thing is, you training young people, that doesn't mean they only work here. It means it prepares them to be able to work anywhere in the industry. So there's a value proposition here. There's also a value proposition for those babies. So I think that's number one. Then number two, are there currently opportunities to think about what you all are doing there through a revenue lens, where we're thinking about funders that are willing to fund small projects done by students to take them into the marketplace? Because again, there's an endless desire for content, and people will consume content all the time. Sometimes you just need $500, $1,000, $2,000 to give you what you need to finish those projects and take them to a platform. So are there spaces, and does it get in the way of what Cleveland State, what Tri-C does, to think about this as a learning opportunity, but also a for-profit opportunity for both the institution and the young people that are involved in that?
Exactly. So anytime we can do a project that can become self-sustaining, it is a project that can be magnified over and over again. And we know that 85% of the people that we train stay in Northeast Ohio. So if we train them and we have this trained workforce here in all aspects of the film industry, whether it's the paperwork to do it, the accounting to do it, the raising of dollars to do it. And we also know that when we put our mind to raising dollars for something in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, we're very successful. So we just need to focus and make this happen.
Thank you so much.
This is a text question. Cleveland has a lot of vacant land. What would it take to build the stages you reference?
So if you're talking about Cleveland proper, it gets a little tricky, and it depends on what kind of stage you're talking about. So if we're saying new construction stage that will yield industry rates, then you're going to need at least probably 15 to 25 acres. It shouldn't be near rails. That's tricky for Cleveland proper. It shouldn't be in a flight path. That's tricky. And so we do have a lot of land in Cleveland proper, but I think years ago, Ivan Schwartz worked with planning and did a whole study of all the available space, and we couldn't find a space in Cleveland. It doesn't mean that we can't create one. We just haven't been able to identify that makeup for new construction soundstage. Outside of Cleveland, there's obviously ample land, but it's some things you want to keep in mind. When we build this shiny, big, new soundstage, depending on where we are in the growth of the industry, it will probably be a bit of landing on the moon, meaning it needs to work. It needs to make sure that work is coming. And so that gets kind of tricky. I start to tell people now, the signal of when to build a soundstage is when the industry tell you it's time to build a soundstage. But in terms of new, but the land, yeah, it's.
But I want to make sure people understand something. When you're talking about building a soundstage, it's not just the soundstage that's driving what you're doing. When people are doing site selection, I got to deal with, does my A-list celebrity artist, a talent, want to stay in this area? Is there a 4-star, 5-star hotel or housing in that area? Are there amenities that make it easier for the crew? Is there enough space? So it's not just about land to build sound stages. It's about what's the ecosystem around it to ensure that you need a city. You're building a small city. And if you're doing a television show, then that may be for several months, not just a few weeks when you're doing a film. So it's not just, because there's been a lot of folks that have talked about distressed assets. And there are a ton of distressed assets in the city. Can you just go to a distressed asset, get that for next to nothing, build a soundstage? Well, no, because Denzel don't want to stay over there. And so how are you, there are ecosystems that are necessary to make a soundstage work, not just the space to build the actual soundstage, open up the doors and do the production.
We want to be.
It's funny you say that, because I was working with an actor, and I won't say what hotel it was, but he checked out right away and said, "I'm going to the Ritz-Carlton over there." But it's a real thing. Like, actors, they're a little bit bougier. They want to stay in a nice place. They will check out of the hotel
20
and
minutes
go to
from the
another hotel.
airport.
Yeah, so it's more than just like a sound stage and like land. It's what do we have to offer? And I think people need to understand why it's important to have all that stuff here, because it's not just for the workforce or for like crew members why it's important for a movie to come here. A lot of business happens, not just like coworkers or the workers don't just get money, but a lot of small businesses will make way more money than they ever make if a film comes in and ask them, "Hey, can we rent this spot for 2 weeks?" And it could be something towards like $2,000 to $5,000 a day to use their spot, or $5,000 a day to park in front of their spot for 1 day. And that's how much, like, it's not just about coworkers and like, if you're not in the industry, like, why is this important? Because it boosts up our economy in Cleveland, not just for coworkers getting paid. Everyone has an opportunity to make money if a movie comes.
I want to get our last question.
Hi, Sheila, I applaud what you're doing. I've heard a lot about movies coming to Cleveland. Your focus seems to be on films. I'd like to give you a perspective from television. I was a television producer for over 20 years as a producer and director in both LA and New York and in between. And Jeff, and you've talked about television is jobs and it's a business. Yes, it's art, creative in some way, but it's a business. And to create a business in Cleveland has to be based on, well, there's two things. Talent, number one. Companies will come if there's talent to support their projects. And number two, in television, very importantly, it's distribution. What access do they have to the distribution companies that are based in LA and New York and maybe some in Atlanta? But those are the two main ingredients. Okay. And talent comes, and you get a job in television because you have a reel. You can show them, this is what I've done before. Not necessarily education, not necessarily a training program. It's what have I done before? So how can we get people here to have a reel to show I worked on this show or I worked on that show? To me, it's developing support for production companies that want to locate here, not big movies, multi-million dollars. We're talking about, several million, but yes, but every job I got was with a production company, and I produced for VH1, HGTV, Lifetime. So how are you? Is your focus on production companies, getting them here so that they can provide the jobs? And just one more thing.
Let's get to that question, because I've got to close this out. So.
Okay. So I will tell you, those young people back there, that's just a few of my cohort. When they're finished with our program, they will have a film in the can. I think 3 of them hit me up yesterday and said, I want to start my own production company. And we're going to invest in them. One of them, who's very shy, so I won't call her out, wants to make her film into a feature. We're going to invest in that. And so our work hasn't been focused on production companies. Our work has been about creating those companies and letting them have something that they can use, whether it's a festival, whether it's here's what I've done. So that's the extent of the work. But we are open for however long we are in this space to leverage what we have to bring this to bear. So those of you who have that experience, like Joy and others, tell us, please help guide us while we have the resources and the ability. This is not my job. This is something I've been put on my heart to do. So I can run differently. I don't have to worry about eating with the Crew Foundation. I worry about feeding others with the Crew Foundation. So take advantage of that for however long we have that ability here. And on the next time, we should talk about broadband infrastructure that we need to have that here. That's a different conversation.
Well, and I think it's a both and piece. I mean, I think and you all, Film Commission, tell me if I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't think it's an either or proposition. You want big budget movies as much as you want television series. The issue is, how do you expand the entire ecosystem? And so, 15 years from now, we hope we're in a place where we're the home of several production companies. But we also know the business of a soundstage is often coming from the distributor anyway. So that's a relationship with Amazon or with Apple TV or with Netflix, who's already got the distribution mechanism. They're paying these folks to produce the content for them. So we already know it's going to Netflix, already know it's going to Amazon. So this is not an either or proposition. This is, how do we create an ecosystem that takes as much advantage of every aspect of this business as possible and creates jobs, creates opportunities, creates revenue. And that takes so many of the people that are already doing this work, but it also takes more investors, it takes more money, it takes more infrastructure. So would really like to thank Amir and Sheila for being a part of this conversation. Want to say thank you to all of you that have come out. This vision of an outdoor conversation is one of the City Club, and I think that we love having more things like this. So again, this is the Outdoor Summer Series. It's presented by Thompson Hine with additional support from Cliffs. And today's forum is also part of the City Club's Community Series sponsored by Bank of America. Up next on Friday, July 19th, Ethan Karp, President and CEO of Magnet, will talk about the state and the future of manufacturing. Then the City Club is going to be back here under the chandelier talking with feature artists from the 2024 Border Light Theater Festival about the importance of representation and diverse creativity in the arts and culture industry. And you can learn more about each of these forums and what's next in the Free Outdoor Summer Series at cityclub.org. Want to say thank you to everyone that came out. to all the elected officials that came out, to the business leaders that came out, to those in the film ecosystem that came out, to regular folk that just came out, and advancing this incredibly important culture of public conversation. So we thank you so much for your involvement. And can we just give one more round of applause to the City Club to expanding outside of their walls into the city to make this a reality. Thank you all so much. My name is Jeff Johnson. Enjoy the rest of your day.